I had been hiding here for hours in our storage closet near the bedroom. And then he arrived, the man she's been cheating on me with. I burst into the room while they were in the middle of it. And it was him. I couldn't believe he would do this to me. And her, my wife, the woman with whom I've been through so much, lay there in shock, staring at me. But in my throat, a plan for revenge began to take shape. A revenge so devastating, so unimaginable, that they would both beg me to stop. She thought I was weak, thought she could deceive me without consequences, thought I'd swallow it all quietly. But in the end, she'll be the one swallowing on her knees in front of all our friends. I'll make it happen, and oh no, this won't be the end. This will only be the beginning. Looking back, I always thought my wife and I had one of those gold standard marriages, boring, predictable, and a little too comfortable. The kind where we could finish each other's sentences but would mostly use that talent to argue over what to order for dinner. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and for a long time I believed we were happy. Then she started wearing perfume. Not just any perfume, this was new perfume. The kind that smells expensive, like flowers and secrets. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I knew one thing. My wife had never cared for perfume in the 10 years we'd been together. She always said it made her sneeze, and frankly, I appreciated not choking on a cloud of evening elegance every time she walked by. At first, I thought, okay, maybe she's trying something new. People grow, right? Maybe she was entering a smell nice phase. But then the perfume was joined by new clothes. Stylish, trendy ones that I knew I hadn't seen her wear before. Now, I know what you're thinking. Come on. Maybe she's just treating herself. And yeah, I thought so too until the phone came into play. She started spending more time glued to her phone. You know how it is. The little smile when a text comes in, the quick swipe to hide the screen when you walk into the room. If I had $1 for every time she said, "It's just work stuff," I could have hired a private investigator right then and there. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I mean, it's not like she was sneaking out at 2 a.m. wearing sunglasses and a trench coat. But the little things started piling up, like tiny puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. One night, as she typed away furiously on her phone, I joked, "You texting the president or something?" She barely looked up. "Just emails," she said. "Emails. At 9 p.m. on a Saturday. Right?" I tried to shake it off, but the doubt had already dug its claws in. Every smile, every laugh, every little moment started to feel off, like I was watching a stranger wear my wife's skin. Of course, I didn't say anything outright at first. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband. But you know what they say, trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you spend a lot of time staring at the cracks. And boy, were those cracks starting to show. The moment everything changed started with something so small, I almost missed it. A single short hair on the bathroom sink. Now, let me give you some context here. I'm as bald as a cue ball by choice, and my wife, bless her, has long, flowing hair that I've had to fish out of the shower drain more times than I can count. So where exactly did this short, black hair come from? At first, I did what any reasonable person would do. I ignored it. It's just a hair, right? Maybe it fell out of a sweater or floated in from, I don't know, the mysterious hair dimension. I wiped it away and went about my day, trying to shake the weird feeling in my gut. But it stuck with me. Every time I walked into that bathroom, it felt like the hair was still there, mocking me. I started replaying the moment over and over in my head. Where did it come from? Did I imagine it? Maybe it was a stray from the neighbor's dog? The fact that we don't even have a dog-owning neighbor didn't stop this theory from crossing my mind. Then the overthinking kicked into high gear. You know that little voice in your head that whispers, "Something's not right?" Yeah, mine was practically screaming at me. I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror one night, staring at the sink like I was about to interrogate it. "Who do you belong to?" I muttered under my breath, like a lunatic. It didn't help that my wife seemed completely oblivious. She was humming in the kitchen, happy as ever, while I was mentally spiraling over one microscopic clue. Part of me thought, you're being ridiculous. It's just a hair. Let it go. But another part of me couldn't let it go. Because deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't our hair. And if it wasn't ours, whose was it? I'll admit, I didn't dive headfirst into paranoia right away. First, I told myself, let it go. You're just being crazy over a hair. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. So one day, while my wife was out, I decided to do what any normal person would do in my situation. I installed hidden cameras in the house. That's normal, right? Totally normal behavior. It wasn't easy to set them up without raising suspicion. I had to get creative, disguising one in a potted plant, another inside the bookshelf, and my personal favorite, an old clock we hadn't looked at in years. I felt like James Bond, except instead of saving the world, I was spying on my wife to figure out who left a stupid hair in the bathroom. Real heroic. For the next few days, I became a full-time surveillance operator. While she was out running errands or in the other room, I would sneak away to check the footage. I watched her make coffee, scroll through her phone, fold laundry. Nothing out of the ordinary. She was her usual self, which was frustrating to say the least. But there were still signs. Little things, like how she started locking the bathroom door, even when she wasn't showering. Or how she seemed distracted when we talked, like she was only half listening. And there was her phone, always close, always face down. Still, I had nothing concrete. No shadowy figures sneaking into the house. No suspicious calls. No random man-shaped outlines in the footage. I felt like I was hunting for a ghost. Late one night, bleary-eyed from hours of replaying the same mundane scenes, I spotted something peculiar. The bathroom camera didn't catch much. A bad angle on purpose for privacy. But I noticed she locked the door again after I left for work that morning. And then, a shadow moved across the gap under the bathroom door. My pulse spiked. It was subtle, almost easy to miss. But it was there. Someone else had been in the bathroom with her. The next evening, armed with a cup of strong coffee and frayed patience, I settled in for another session of watching the footage. My eyes burned from hours of staring at the screen, rewinding the same clips over and over. But just as I was about to call it a night, something changed. It started with the doorbell. On the footage, my wife walked to the front door, casually brushing her hair back as if she were expecting someone. My stomach dropped. I leaned in closer, heart pounding. She opened the door, and there he was. A man wearing a hoodie, his face obscured. They stood there for a moment, talking in low voices. Her body language caught my attention. She didn't seem surprised or awkward. She leaned in slightly, her shoulders relaxed, her movements natural. Whoever this man was, she knew him well. And then it happened. She stepped aside, letting him in. The door closed behind them, and they disappeared into the living room. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't some delivery guy or a door-to-door salesperson. This was someone she wanted in the house. Someone she didn't hesitate to let in while I wasn't home. I clicked furiously through the camera feeds, switching angles, hoping for a clear shot of his face. But the hoodie was always angled just right, concealing his identity. I slammed my fist against the desk in frustration, but I couldn't stop watching. On one of the cameras, I saw them walking down the hallway toward our bedroom. She glanced back at him, smiling, before pushing the door open. He followed her in, the door closing softly behind them. And that was it. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen, frozen. My chest felt tight, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. Every rational thought I'd clung to, every excuse I'd made for her behavior, shattered in that moment. She wasn't running errands, she wasn't scrolling through work emails, and she certainly wasn't doing anything innocent. But the worst part? I didn't know who he was. The hoodie was maddeningly effective. It could have been anyone. A stranger, someone I'd never met, or someone I knew. The thought burned in my mind, the not knowing eating at me worse than the betrayal itself. I felt furious and helpless all at once, like a soldier with no weapon to fight back. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed more. A name, a face, something concrete. If I charged in now, all I had was circumstantial footage. She could lie, deny, twist it into something else entirely. No, if I wanted to expose her and this mystery man, I had to be smart. But as I sat there, staring at the screen, I couldn't shake the image of her smile. The smile she used to give me, now given to someone else. After seeing the hooded man enter my house and vanish into the bedroom, I couldn't sit still. The questions were relentless. Who was he? How long has this been going on? And how could she betray me like this? The footage haunted me, but it wasn't enough. I needed a name, a connection, something to give me power in this mess. And then it hit me, her phone. Her phone had been a fortress lately, always glued to her hand or hidden away, face down. The way she guarded it was subtle but unmistakable. If there were answers to be found, they'd be in there. That evening, I waited for my chance. We were having dinner, a quiet meal that felt forced on my end. I couldn't stop watching her. She smiled at me across the table like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just hosted a stranger in our bedroom the day before. The audacity of it was infuriating, but I played my part. "Hey," I said casually, holding up my phone with a sheepish grin. "Dead battery. Can I borrow yours to check movie times?" Her eyes flicked to her phone, resting near her plate, but she didn't hesitate. "Sure," she said, sliding it over to me. Too easy, I thought, but as I picked it up, I felt the weight of the moment. This was it, my chance to find the truth. I opened the browser, scrolling aimlessly at first to maintain the ruse. She barely glanced at me, focused on her food. My hands felt clammy as I navigated back to her messages, pretending to fumble with the unfamiliar layout of her phone. And then it happened. A text notification appeared at the top of the screen. The sender saved as Mom. "Tomorrow, I'll come by at 3 o'clock. My heart stopped. 3 o'clock. That was when I was usually at work. And it wasn't her mom. Her mother wouldn't bother with coded, secretive messages like that. This was him. It had to be him. I glanced up at her, keeping my expression neutral. She hadn't noticed the message pop up, still calmly eating. Meanwhile, my mind raced. Everything lined up. The timing, the vagueness of the text, the fact that her phone had been surgically attached to her hand for weeks. I handed the phone back to her with a grateful smile, my stomach churning. "Thanks. Looks like there's a new movie we can check out this weekend." She smiled back, completely oblivious, and for a moment, I almost couldn't believe how easily she lied to my face. But now I had something concrete. I knew when he'd be coming. I'd pretend to leave for work as usual, but I wouldn't be going anywhere. I'd be waiting, hidden, ready to catch them in the act. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, this charade was going to end. The next morning, I went through the motions of getting ready for work, my movements mechanical and my mind fixed on the plan. My wife kissed me goodbye like always, her smile as casual and sweet as if she weren't planning to betray me in just a few hours. "Have a good day," she said, and I forced myself to respond in kind, even though my hands clenched so tightly around my keys that I could feel the metal edges biting into my skin. I drove a few blocks before circling back, parking the car far enough from the house to avoid suspicion. Quietly, I slipped inside and took my position in the storage closet near the bedroom. The space was cramped, filled with forgotten boxes and the faint smell of mothballs, but I barely noticed. My ears were tuned to every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound. Time seemed to crawl. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure it would give me away. But then, finally, the doorbell rang. From my hiding spot, I heard her footsteps approaching the front door. My breathing slowed, every nerve in my body on edge. The door creaked open, and their voices, low and indistinct, floated toward me. She sounded casual, almost cheerful. He murmured something I couldn't make out, but it was clear from the tone that they were comfortable with each other. Too comfortable. I shifted slightly, peering through a crack in the closet door. There he was, the hooded man stepping inside. He still kept his hood up, his face obscured, which only fueled my rage. They walked down the hall together, her hand brushing his arm in a way that made my stomach churn. And then, just as I'd seen in the footage, she led him into our bedroom. The door clicked shut behind them. I forced myself to wait, counting the seconds to steady my nerves. My hands shook with the effort of holding back the fury coursing through me. Every instinct screamed at me to charge in, but I had to pick the right moment. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they were caught. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. My pulse roaring in my ears, I pushed open the closet door as quietly as I could and stepped into the hallway. The bedroom door loomed ahead of me, the final barrier. I gripped the handle and threw it open with a force that sent it banging against the wall. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, my voice booming in the confined space. They froze, their faces snapping toward me in unison. My wife was halfway to the bed, her expression a mix of shock and panic. And then, the hooded man turned to face me, pulling down his hood. I staggered, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just anyone. It wasn't some random fling or a stranger I'd never met. It was my best friend. The world seemed to tilt as I stood there, staring at my best friend. The man I had trusted with everything. The man who had been by my side through the highest highs and the lowest lows. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind scrambled to reconcile the person standing in front of me with the memories I had of him. Laughing over beers, giving a toast at my wedding, even comforting me through rough patches. And now here he was in my bedroom with my wife. My wife's face turned the color of ash. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No words coming out. He was the first to speak, stammering something incoherent. His hands raised as if he could somehow physically deflect my anger. "Wait, listen. I can explain. Explain." My voice was low, dangerous, the kind of tone even I didn't recognize. "Explain what, exactly? That you've been sneaking into my house? Sleeping with my wife? Or that you had the nerve to look me in the eye this whole time, pretending to be my friend?" He took a step back, his eyes wide, like a cornered animal. It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I barked, my voice rising. "Because what I think is that you're a lying, backstabbing piece of garbage. What I think is that you've betrayed me in a way no one else could. What I think is that you're about to regret every single decision that led you to this moment." My wife finally found her voice, her words coming out in a shaky rush. "Please, it didn't mean anything. I swear. It was a mistake. A mistake." I laughed bitterly, the sound so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. "A mistake is spilling your coffee. A mistake is forgetting to lock the front door. This is deliberate, calculated, repeated." I took a step forward, my fists clenched so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. "And you know what? I don't even need your excuses, because I have proof." Their faces twisted in confusion. I pointed toward the hidden clock camera I'd placed on the dresser. "Everything. Recorded. Every disgusting little detail. So don't bother lying to me." The color drained from my best friend's face, and my wife let out a small gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. "Both of you," I said, my voice trembling with fury, "will regret this." The room was silent, the weight of my words settling heavily between us. For the first time, my best friend looked genuinely afraid. My wife crumpled onto the bed, her head in her hands, whispering, I'm sorry, but sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough." I turned on my heel and left the room, slamming the door behind me. They didn't follow. In the hallway, I stopped to catch my breath, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I didn't know what I was going to do next. All I knew was that I wasn't done with them. Not yet. The idea struck me one night as I replayed the footage for the 100th time. If my best friend, the so-called man I trusted most, thought he'd escape unscathed, he was dead wrong. And what better setting to expose the affair than the upcoming birthday party for his wife, his own wife. She and I had always been friendly, exchanging small talk at gatherings and texting occasionally about surprises for the two of them. She was kind, bubbly, and completely undeserving of the betrayal brewing under her nose. That was the cruel brilliance of it. Her party, her guests, her special day. It was poetic justice. I sent her a text the next morning, offering to help organize the celebration. She was delighted, gushing about how sweet it was of me to want to pitch in. The whole time, I could barely contain the irony. The party planning fell into place quickly. She chose her favorite restaurant, a cozy, upscale spot with an intimate private room. I coordinated everything, the guest list, the decor, even the playlist. My wife and best friend were, of course, included on the invite list. I made sure of that. As the day approached, I fine-tuned the trap. The footage was ready, clipped to include the clearest, most damning moments. I rented a projector under the guise of showing a tribute video for the birthday girl. In reality, it would be the moment her world and their affair would unravel. The night of the party arrived, and I went all in on the performance. I smiled, joked, and made small talk like nothing was wrong. My wife, oblivious to my plan, seemed relieved by my good mood. She even teased me as I fussed with the projector setup, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Guests began to trickle in, filling the room with laughter and warmth. The birthday girl was glowing, thanking everyone for being there. My best friend showed up with my wife in tow, his arm brushing hers in a way that made my blood boil. He greeted his wife with a kiss, the audacity of it almost making me laugh out loud. As dinner wrapped up, I stood and tapped my glass to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice just enough to command the room. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate a wonderful woman and a dear friend. So, I've prepared something special. A little video to honor her and the bonds we all share." The room erupted in cheers and applause as I dimmed the lights and started the video. The first few slides were innocent. Pictures of the birthday girl laughing, dancing, and smiling with friends. But then, as the music swelled, the footage shifted. The screen flickered to life, showing my wife opening the door to the hooded man. The guests murmured, confused at first, but their confusion turned to stunned silence as the scene unfolded. The hallway, the smiles, the bedroom door closing. The birthday girl's face twisted in horror. "Wait, is that—" "Yes," I said, cutting her off. My voice was calm, steady, but filled with ice. "That's your husband, and my wife." The room exploded into chaos. Gasps, shouts, and stunned whispers filled the air as everyone turned to look at my wife and my best friend. My wife buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. My best friend froze, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "How could you?" the birthday girl choked out, her voice shaking. "How dare you?" My best friend tried to speak, stammering apologies, but she wasn't having it. She stood, trembling with fury, and threw her drink in his face. As the chaos unfolded, I turned to my wife, who sat paralyzed in her chair. "Get up," I said. She didn't move. I said, "Get up," I repeated louder this time. She rose shakily to her feet, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Kneel," I commanded. Her eyes widened, the shame and humiliation clear as day. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Kneel," I said again, my voice unyielding, and she did. In front of everyone, she dropped to her knees, sobbing as the weight of her betrayal crushed her. The room was silent except for her cries and the sound of the birthday girl throwing my best friend's things out the door. The fallout hit like a bomb. There was no slow unraveling, just an explosion of consequences that left nothing standing. My wife, once the center of every social circle we shared, became a pariah almost overnight. Friends who used to greet her with warmth now avoided her completely, their looks filled with judgment and pity. Family gatherings became awkward and strained. Her parents, who had adored me, couldn't hide their disappointment in her. She tried to salvage what she could. There were tearful phone calls to friends, desperate attempts to explain her side, but no one wanted to hear it. The story had spread far and fast, thanks to the guests at the party. And with the footage burned into everyone's memory, there wasn't much left for her to defend. As for my best friend, his life crumbled just as swiftly. His wife wasted no time packing his belongings and throwing him out of their home. I heard through the grapevine that she filed for divorce the very next day. He tried to smooth things over, begging for forgiveness, but she was done. She wasn't the kind of woman to look back once the trust was broken. His reputation took an even bigger hit. People at work whispered about him. Clients and colleagues turned their backs, and the once confident man I thought I knew began to fade into obscurity. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from it all. My wife tried to reach me, of course. She left messages on my phone. Long, rambling apologies. Please for a second chance. We can fix this, she sobbed in one. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. Please don't give up on us. I didn't reply. When she showed up at the house, I let her knock until her hands were red, then watched her drive away from the window. When she tried to corner me at the grocery store, I walked past her like she didn't exist. My silence was absolute, my refusal to engage more punishing than any words I could have said. People told me I was cold, that maybe I should hear her out at least for closure. But I didn't need closure. I needed peace. And peace didn't involve letting her back into my life to justify what she'd done. The destruction I'd unleashed at the party lingered, its ripples spreading far beyond just the four of us. Friendships shifted, loyalties divided, and those who'd once stood close to us chose sides. Most stood with me. She was left with no one. And while I didn't revel in her suffering, I also didn't feel pity. This was the life she chose when she let him into our home, our bed. And now she was living in the ruins of it.